Hello everybody, and today we're going to be going over my Big Ten power rankings after week 4. As you can see, this is my week 3 power rankings. This was my first ever power rankings I've ever did. So, you're going to see a little bit of movement in week 4. Let's get into it. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, as you can see, this was so long I couldn't even fit it in one tweet, so I had to do 2 tweets. Starting at number 18, we've got UCLA. This is kind of self-explanatory. UCLA has been horrible this year. They fired their coach after last week. It's been a disaster so far. They lost to New Mexico. I saw this tweet the other day. It said, UCLA needs to move to the Big Sky, and Big Sky official conference Twitter page actually said, no thanks, you can keep them. And I was like, what? Not even the Big Sky wants these guys. They're horrible this year. They belong at the bottom. Maybe the worst Power 5 team this year. At number 17, we've got Wisconsin. They looked horrible this week. It was awful. So for context, they played Maryland. The final score says 28-10. It was not really that close. It was like a 20-3 kind of game maybe. Wisconsin scored a garbage time touchdown at the end. Obviously, I didn't watch that game because why would anybody watch Wisconsin? But they looked awful against Alabama. I didn't move them down too much after Alabama last week because they're Alabama. They're supposed to beat Wisconsin. But after this pathetic showing against Maryland, yeah, I'm going to move you down. Up next, we got Purdue. They're just moving up solely because Wisconsin looked so bad. I think they had a bye week this week. Actually, hold on. They played Notre Dame this week. I don't know why they thought they had a bye game. Whatever. They didn't look that great against Notre Dame. The only reason they're moving up is because I think if these two played right now, Purdue would beat Wisconsin. That's how I do these rankings. So, and also, Purdue is just not a very good team either. These 3 teams are like a tier below everybody else. I mean, UCLA is kind of in a tier of its own, to be honest with you. But Purdue is just a bad team this year. But they are a little better than what they were last year, I will say. Up next here, we got Northwestern. Northwestern didn't play good this week. They just moved up because, again, Wisconsin moved down. 14, I've got Rutgers. I was actually pretty decently high on them, and as you can see, they move up only because Wisconsin moves down. But they lost to Iowa this week. Iowa, the worst offensive team of all time. Now, I'm still not as low on Rutgers as some other people are, but Rutgers really should have won that game, and I'm pretty sure they lost that game by 10 points. And they let Iowa score over 30 points. Now, this just tells me that their defense is not very good this year because, in week 1 against Ohio, they let Ohio put up over 30 on them. And now I know Ohio is a pretty good group of 5 team, but still, you shouldn't be giving up 30 points to a group of 5 team. That's utterly unacceptable. And you put up 30 points, arguably even worse, to a bad Iowa team. I mean, the only reason they're moving up is because Wisconsin is so bad. Minnesota moves down because another team impressed me a little bit more. They had a bye week this week, but last week they played California, and they didn't look very good doing it, so I didn't have too much of a problem doing this. Up next, we got Michigan State. I knew this game against USC would probably have no defense. You have some good quarterbacks like Aiden Childs and Jade Mayava playing, and I'm pretty sure the final score ended up being like 48-38. I knew not much defense would be happening, but I expected Michigan State's defense to hold them at least under 40. That didn't end up happening. I thought this game could be a sneaky close game, and it kind of was. But I expected Michigan State to maybe even win this game, considering how bad USC's defense is this year. Up next, we got Iowa. Now, Iowa's offense they really impressed me last week. I know it was against Rutgers, and Rutgers doesn't really have a good defense, but Iowa really impressed me last week. Their quarterback, Gronowski, I believe is his name. He actually looked pretty good this week. And if they keep winning, of course, Iowa's always going to have a good defense. So if they can get their offense going, they could be a scary team in the Big Ten this year that nobody wants to play. Up next here, we got Maryland, and this starts the top 10. These are teams that I think could maybe be in the top 25 by year's end. We got Maryland up here, and I really considered putting them above Nebraska, who we'll talk about in a minute. But Maryland, they looked pretty good against Wisconsin last week. Now, take that for granted because Wisconsin is not very good. But we thought Wisconsin was pretty decent before the Maryland game, and they just wasn't. Anyway, Maryland I think they're 4-0 now. Maryland looks really good so far this year. And like I said with Iowa, if they get hot, they're not going to want to play them. They have a fantastic freshman quarterback. So watch out for Maryland. Up next here we got Nebraska. I can't really do much besides do this. Nebraska really should have won that game against Michigan last week. I mean, it was bad. I mean, they didn't play that bad, but Michigan didn't play that good either. So they had an opportunity to win that game against Michigan. Bryce Underwood didn't impress me too much. He barely completed 50% of his passes. Raiola was not bad, but he could have been better. I just don't think Nebraska is that good this year. I didn't think they were that good before. And, well, I kind of thought they were, but now they're definitely not after struggling against Michigan, who I don't even think is that great this year. Up next, we got Illinois. And I don't even need to talk about last week's game. You guys know what happened. They lost by 53 points to an Indiana team who we'll talk about a little later, but boy, that was really, really bad. And I thought Illinois was going to make the playoffs. That's going to be really hard unless you somehow find a way to beat Ohio State, which I don't think that's going to happen, especially with how bad they looked this week. Luke Altmaier wasn't horrible, but he needed to do better. Now, I didn't expect him to put up 63 points, but I did expect him to, not put up 10. So, Illinois, they're just not that great, especially after the Indiana game last week. That was just a disaster. Up next, we got Washington. They looked pretty good in the Apple Cup last week. Now, they played Washington State last year, and they really should have won that game. That was the John Mateer game where they were at the 2-yard line, I believe, with it was 4th down and goal, and they couldn't find a way to sneak it into the end zone anyway. They look good, and they have a good quarterback with Demond Williams. And Ohio State plays them this week, which I'm a little concerned about. I don't know how much of this game I'll be able to watch because all the other games that'll be going on this week. And also, I'm going on vacation this next week, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch all these games since I'm not home on my home TV, so it's going to be a little difficult. Anyway, Washington looked pretty good last week, especially their offense. They need to clean up some stuff on defense, though. Up next, we got USC, and this is just the same story, different year. USC always going to have a good offense, but their defense is always going to allow 30 or 40 or even 50. I would love to imagine them playing Ohio State, and Ohio State just putting up 63 points on them. Obviously, they have a really good quarterback in Jaden Maiava. He's been really good so far this year. The defense is worse than it was last year. I didn't expect to say that. I thought USC's defense was going to be better this year, but that's just not what's happened at all. But they can only go as far as their offense takes them. Up next here, we got the top 5, and I really didn't know where to put this team. I could see them even being below Washington after this week. Michigan. Now, they didn't impress me at all against Nebraska. Nebraska's not even that good, and Michigan really should have lost that game. If they were playing Washington or USC, I think they would have lost this game. Now, I just don't know about Bryce Underwood. I think he is extremely overhyped, and I'm not just saying that because I'm an Ohio State fan, I promise. This is the second game this year where he's barely completed 50% of his passes. The game against Oklahoma, he didn't even complete barely 40% of his passes. He just hasn't been that great this year, and I wasn't expecting him to be that great. It's only his freshman year. Next year, Michigan should be a lot better than they are this year. I don't even think Michigan is going to sniff the playoff this year. At number 4, we've got Indiana. Now, I think this is the start of where these teams really have a realistic chance to win the Big Ten championship, and that starts with Indiana. Obviously, there doesn't need to be stated much of how good they looked against Illinois last week. If you wanted me to sit up here and praise them for the next 10 minutes, I could, but I'm not going to. Yeah, they have a great offense. Their defense is also really good. And they finally won a big game, too. Last year, they only played one top 25 team, Ohio State, and they got thrashed. Now, I know Ohio State ended up going to win the national championship last year, but Indiana, it wasn't even close, except the first quarter. Anyway, Indiana should be a real competitor in the Big Ten this year, and they could even win the conference. I don't think they play Ohio State this year, so I don't know if they can beat Oregon or Penn State, but just keep your eye on them. Up next, too, we've got Penn State, and they've got a really crucial game coming up against Oregon this week. I'm pretty sure Penn State was off last week, so they got a week to prepare against Oregon. I'm not going to predict that game yet. I'm not even going to give any predictions or spoilers or anything for it. I want you guys to get my live reaction to it. But what I will say is, though, Drew Adler is he hasn't looked very good this year. I was really high on Penn State coming into the year, and their offense is just not not been as good as I thought with Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and Drew Aller all coming back. I don't think they have the receivers, and they never really have. That's Penn State's biggest draw. They don't have any real playmakers on that team, and they haven't since Saquon Barkley was on that team. At number 2, we've got Oregon. Now, these are the teams that I think will get to the Big Ten Championship, these top 2 teams right here. Oregon really impressed me this week. They actually looked a lot better than they did last week. And it was a rival game. I wasn't expecting Oregon to come in and dominate like they did, but Dan Lanning had the guys ready. They beat Oregon State. Now, I know Oregon State ain't very good this year, but they still beat them by 34 points. Oregon's looking good this year. I have them as my number 2 team in the country this year. A lot of people didn't like it. I had them at my number 2 team whenever I did my rankings last week, and I still have them at number 2, just disclaimer there. I think Oregon's really good this year. I think they could go to the national championship game, but in order to do that, they're going to have to get past this number 1 team. Ohio State is by far the best team in the country, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan, I promise you. I feel like everybody's starting to know that now. They won the national championship last year. My golden rule is you always have a team number 1 after they've won the championship. I don't care if it was Michigan a few years ago, whenever they lost 30 guys. I still had them as number 1 entering the year because they earned it. They just won the championship. Anyway, Ohio State, they're going to be great again this year. They have Jeremiah Smith, Julian Sand, Carnell Tate, Max Clear, James Peoples, C.J. Donaldson. They're going to be just fine after losing Will Howard. Anyway, that wraps up my list for the week. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to this channel, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video. I haven't thought of that yet. See you guys.